Hey, good morning, everyone. Josh's Severe Weather. Happy Monday to you. Welcome to my channel. I'm a meteorologist in the Raleigh area, and I'm going to be discussing Hurricane Lee and other potential threats coming from the tropics. Before I do that, I just want to take a quick moment here to remember those who we lost in the 9/11 attacks. This is the 22nd anniversary. I think we all know where we were when that happened, but my thoughts and prayers go out to all those involved. We lost a lot of folks. We lost first responders, people in the military serving in an Operation Freedom, Enduring Freedom. And of course, my thoughts and prayers are with everybody. So I'm going to take a very quick moment of silence just to remember them in my thoughts. All right. Obviously, that's an emotional moment for me, but we've got to move on here and talk about the weather. So let's share screens here and let's take a look at the threat that is growing here across eastern New England and Atlantic Canada for Hurricane Lee towards next weekend. And there's still going to be some changes here in the forecast track, but we're starting to see some better agreement in how the models are dealing with the forward speed and the strength of Lee and how it could be brushing parts of eastern New England before eventual landfall somewhere between eastern Maine and Nova Scotia, with the Bay of Fundy certainly in play here. So we're going to take a look at the large scale pattern in a minute. First, I want to just kind of show you an overview of what we're tracking in the tropics. Hurricane Lee, which is starting to strengthen again, Category 3 storm. Tropical Storm Margot, which will likely become a hurricane but not threaten any land here in the east central Atlantic. Now we've got two areas to keep an eye on. The first one I don't think is going to survive much longer, AL 97 west of the Cape Verde Islands, Cabo Verdes. The one behind it actually is expected to grow and kind of overtake it here in a few days. That has a medium 50% chance of development in the next 7 days. And you're going to see some similarities to where Hurricane Lee formed. It's actually going to be following kind of a similar track by the time we get towards the end of this week, the following weekend, and beyond towards September 18th, the week of the 18th. So I'm going to talk about that towards the tail end of the video, but let's focus at the issue at hand here. Here's a look at the infrared satellite, and you can see really only just a couple of players on the map at this point. Hurricane Lee, which is beginning to grow in size and beginning to intensify. We've got an eye that is clearing out here again, and wind shear is beginning to relax, and it is starting to slow down as it tracks west-northwest, may even bend back to the west a little bit here. So we have to monitor the forward speed of it. Eventually, it looks like it will make a right turn and come up in this direction, and the turn could be a little bit closer to Bermuda. It could be a little bit farther away from Bermuda, but it's not expected to continue in this direction. That is not likely, as we have a trough here across Texas and the plains that's going to head east, and what that's going to do is change the steering flow around from east to west to south to north. So the question mark is not going to be, does it make the turn, but to what speed? And then by the time it's in here, does it continue north? Does it turn northeast? Or does it try to curl back a little bit closer to New England? And more models are showing somewhat of a curl back. And I'm going to talk about why that's going to happen. Otherwise, we do have Tropical Storm Margot here and a pretty healthy looking core, but dealing with wind shear actually from the outflow of Lee. That's bringing some of that southerly shear in. So this storm's not going to be nearly as big as Lee, but it is going to have some opportunity to strengthen a little bit more. Elsewhere, we've got AL 97 here. You can see it doesn't look very organized. And then we've got another wave just off the screen here, which will probably be AL 98 here in a couple of days. And that is another one that we do need to keep an eye on, although it's still potentially a couple of weeks away from any impact here on the East Coast potentially. And I say potentially because that is still too far off to give you any kind of accurate forecasting on it. Again, here's a look at the infrared. Quiet in the Gulf, quiet in the Caribbean, quiet in the Western Atlantic. We do have a boundary in here that's kind of draped across the eastern U.S., and that's protecting us from anything right now. But you can see Lee is beginning to build up some colder cloud tops and beginning to grow in size. Bigger than it was when it was a Category 5 a few days ago, but not quite as intense across the center. Here's Idalia, or not Idalia, Margot. I know we're still talking about Idalia. That one's probably up in here somewhere and not tropical. And then here we go, AL 97 and what I think will eventually be AL 98. Neither of these looks very organized right now. They're dealing with wind shear from Margot and Nigel, or not Nigel, Margot and Lee off to the north and west. But one of these could become Nigel. I think it'll be the tail one, not the lead one. And I'll show you guys why here in just a little bit. And nothing really to worry about in the Pacific on either side here. The remains of Hova are falling apart in cooler waters. So all the action right now in the world is in the Atlantic and really in the central Atlantic. So here are two beasts here spinning around, keeping their distance from each other. I don't know. I've seen a couple of mentions online of the two merging. That's not happening. They're too far away for that to happen. But both are going to be getting steered by high pressure ridge off to their north, and then high pressure will build in between the two. And once that happens, then we could eventually see something come underneath. It's not going to be, though, over the next few days. Hurricane Lee looks a little bit better here on infrared. You see the colder cloud tops. Those are the pinks here. They are starting to wrap around. It is not rapidly intensifying. There's still a bit of wind shear to deal with, but it is beginning to show a more organized structure to it. This time yesterday, we had an eye wall replacement. That's what happens with a stronger storm, where the eye collapses, a new one forms outside of it, and it does for about a day or so weaken because of that. The winds do not quite line up as the eye replaces itself. It's kind of like, I don't know if you guys have ever played dreidel or tops or anything like that, but when those spin and they hit something else, they stop spinning and then the next one picks up momentum. So I don't know if that's a great analogy, but just to give you guys an idea, we are starting to see some strengthening again here. And we will likely have a category 4 at some point in the next maybe 12 hours, possibly 24 hours. Hasn't happened yet, but I think looking here at these cold cloud tops, it certainly is a possibility. The other thing you can see here is that the size of the storm is growing. The outflow is improving, not so much on the southern part of it, but on the northern and northeastern side of the storm. And the wind shear that hit this from the west, you can see has pretty much all but gone. We are seeing growth on the western side. That is something you need to watch in New England, because the bigger the storm gets on the western side, the more of an impact it could have on you guys here as we get towards the weekend. The visible satellite is not quite getting out there at this point, so we won't look at that yet. I'm doing this a little early. I got to hit the road for some work travel. You can see, though, this is the wind shear map. Green is low wind shear, where things are favorable. Yellow is marginal. Red is unfavorable. And you can see Lee is kind of on the cusp of the unfavorable. It's not quite in there, but here's the center of Lee. And you can see it's kind of on the border between green and red. So not the most ideal wind shear amount for this to rapidly intensify. We want to see it down in here where the low wind shear is. But it does have the possibility of intensifying as it moves into this yellow and light green here before wind shear starts to pick up. It is relaxing, though, over the next couple of days in here. It is expected to increase as the system gains latitude here towards the end of the week. So very complicated to kind of forecast, but just to give you guys an idea of what we're looking at here. Recon plane flew through the center a few times here overnight. We found that the surface pressure dropped slightly down to 950 millibars, which is category 3 strength. That pressure was as low as the high 920s a few days ago. That was category 5 strength. I'm going to show you what the models are showing, and that is intensification and a drop into the 940s today and maybe 930s tonight. So we will see intensification. And then you can see the winds that it sampled here. And let me circle. This is in knots, but flight level winds during the 2 penetrations were kind of in that 115 knot range, which is about 140 miles per hour. That is usually reduced down to the surface level here of about 105 knots, which is about 120 miles per hour. So the winds aren't quite responding to the pressure drop, but they certainly could get there here in future plane recons. But they are measuring winds, and these do take a pretty good sampling of what's going on here. So these are definitely data points that we need to be watching here. So anyway, just wanted to show you what they're measuring in there. They're not just going in to see what it looks like. They're actually taking measurements. There's a NOAA plane as well that's looking at the outside of this system, just sampling the atmosphere. It's kind of doing a loop around the outflow that's measuring things like wind shear and temperature, and just looking at the size of the winds. It is not going in through the center of the storm, so these guys have kind of a smoother flight. But you can see here, taking a look at wind observations, and you can see the wind shear is we have east-southeast winds here near the ground, and then going up aloft, we have southeast winds eventually becoming southerly and southwesterly. So this is just kind of looking and sampling at the outside of the storm, and still seeing some wind shear, but this is not strong. It's not going from east-southeast near the ocean water over to westerly here a few thousand feet up. It's taking some time to switch around and back with height. Here's the track forecast, and expected to be a category 4 here over the next, say, 36 hours, and then gradually some weakening. It's going over an area here. See these hashed lines of some higher ocean heat content. So it's going to be in a place where it will be favorable for strengthening. How strong it gets is still a bit uncertain. There's a chance that this system, for whatever reason, slows down enough where it can't really strengthen anymore. It churns up the water, which kind of lowers that amount of ocean heat content. There's also a chance that over a brief burst here, it could get back to even low-end Category 5. So that's not looking as likely as it did yesterday at this time, but it looks like a possibility. But either way, it's going to strengthen and grow before it makes the turn to the right, when it will go over some cooler water and gradually weaken down to Category 2 by the time it's west of Bermuda here during the day on Thursday night, Friday morning. And then Friday night back down to Category 1, which is still a powerful storm, by the way. If you live on the coast here, 80-mile-per-hour winds certainly could do damage. Certainly, it's nothing like 130, but it is strong. But you can see the potential path here does grow. And if you interpolate it or extrapolate it, it goes over to the Rhode Island-Connecticut border, and on the east side goes over to Sable Island. So anywhere from Rhode Island to eastern Nova Scotia is potentially in the path of this. And until the storm comes up into here, we're not going to have enough of a finite answer as to where exactly it's going to make landfall. Intensity forecasts all show that this will strengthen over the next 24 hours, level off, and then begin weakening in 48 hours. Fewer models showing Category 4 strength, but I still think that is possible because we're not far from it now. But the good news is that by the time this passes Bermuda, all models show it weakening to Category 2 and eventually Category 1, possibly even tropical storm strength by the time it makes landfall, although I would forecast Category 1 based on what I'm seeing aloft, and that's going to be some energy coming in from the jet stream itself. Wind shear goes up here in about 3 days. Water temperatures start dropping, and we see things are no longer favorable for this to be a major hurricane after 120 hours, so after Friday morning. So that's what we're looking at there. Here are the forecast tracks. You can see generally they have shifted west, not so much around Bermuda, but when it gets into the northwestern Atlantic, you do see a bend to the right, and then there's something tugging it away and pushing it back to the left a little bit, which is better news if you're up the coast from Halifax, for example. But this is still going to be quite uncertain. Once we get past 96 hours, things definitely look a lot more uncertain. So overall, the ensemble mean has shifted west again. Each model run is coming in more and more to the left, which means if you're in eastern New England, that is very much of a concern to you. But we don't have the ensemble mean going over Cape Cod. We have it inching closer, but not moving that direction. This, though, does continue to give us confidence that this system is less likely to recurve and miss land. It is more likely to at least affect Maine, New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, Prince Edward Island, and eventually Newfoundland. So that's what we're watching here. The GFS ensembles, you can see, are again shifting west with the mean coming up near Yarmouth in Nova Scotia, going over the eastern Bay of Fundy, going right over St. John's and Prince Edward Island, and then coming up into I think it's the Gulf of the St. Lawrence, and I'm sorry if I'm wrong about that, and eventually making the right turn. But the deterministic GFS continues to give us a scare in eastern New England. We've got kind of a push back to the north and west with a near approach here Saturday morning to coastal New England before turning away and coming up the Bay of Fundy. This, to me, this red line is kind of our worst case scenario when you talk about impacts, because what happens with these storms as they gain latitude, a lot of the dirty side shifts to the north and west, and that puts anybody from the islands and Cape Cod through Maine, New Hampshire seacoast, Maine seacoast, down East Maine, the islands there, New Brunswick, and then even with the storm surge on the right side of the storm puts western Nova Scotia at risk as well. So we're talking a lot of people that potentially with this predicted track are going to be in deep doo-doo if this track holds, and it could certainly change still. So that's what I'm watching for you guys here, but I don't want to scare everybody, but I think you've got a few days now where you really do need to be watching every little adjustment in the track. Ensembles are in great agreement here for the next few days. Then we start to see some difference in speed. We have a couple that are getting kind of close to Bermuda, and then a couple that stay down to the west near 70 west, which is better for Bermuda. Then we see here, this is going to be Friday at lunchtime. Several ensemble members still to the west of Bermuda or southwest of Bermuda, and some racing out to the north, taking aim at Nova Scotia. Quite a bit of spread once we get past Thursday morning. You can see that here. But overall, the ellipse here, where most of the ensembles goes, remains just east of New England, but now it grows and includes New England by the time we get to Saturday evening around 8 o'clock Eastern and Atlantic Standard Time. We still see a few ensembles that are trying to slow this down and move it back to the west. I don't think that happens. I don't think it hits Long Island or Connecticut, but Rhode Island and especially Massachusetts, Maine, New Hampshire is going to be tough to hit because of the small amount of coast it has. But definitely Massachusetts, Maine, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia. I think all the ensembles show a decent amount of agreement that those areas will be under the gun. And then eventually Prince Edward Island and Newfoundland as well. Here's a look at the European ensemble possibility of tropical storm conditions. And right now in Bermuda, it's about 60% higher amounts on the western part of the island than the eastern. So there's definitely a chance that Bermuda will be at least under a tropical storm watch here, probably around Wednesday, and then a tropical storm warning Thursday and Friday. And then I think we are going to see at the very least a tropical storm watch issued on Thursday for Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, New Brunswick, and Nova Scotia, and maybe a hurricane watch at some point in the middle of this track. Here's a look as we get to the weekend. And tropical storm force winds look like they are pretty likely 60, 70% over western Nova Scotia, 40% over down East Maine and Cape Cod, 50% over southern New Brunswick, and 40 to 50%, even 60% here over Prince Edward Island. So a pretty good chance here that as the storm grows, that tropical storm conditions are going to be expected here in many of these areas. Even if that storm track flirts with the New England coast and then pushes away and comes through southwestern Nova Scotia, you still, I think, have a chance at damaging winds and surf here over the weekend. So that's what we're looking at. Here's a look at why the shift back to the west. If you take a look here at Wednesday night and Thursday, you see a pretty strong trough centered over Quebec and back to Ohio. This is going to bring a cold front east here Wednesday night and Thursday. That is going to draw the storm to the right and bring it to the west of Bermuda. It's going to turn it north and maybe even northeastward. Now that trough lifts out here on Friday, and after it does so, you start to see heights coming back up here. There's an area of high pressure in here, and let me circle it for you guys. Big area of high pressure here to the east of the storm, and what that's going to do is it's actually going to kind of nose in here for a day or so and provide more of a south-southeasterly steering flow. That allows the storm to come a little bit closer to New England. Let me make that darker for you guys here. It allows things to come a little bit closer to New England until the next trough back in here swings in. So while the storm is going to try and head in this direction and follow the trough, eventually the trough lifts out and the ridge takes over for just a day or so. And that gives you kind of an opportunity for this to get a little bit closer to New England. So that's what I'm watching for everybody here, is that one little bend back to the left. And it may not be a major bend, but it's enough of a bend because of the shape of this coast to threaten more parts of land than maybe what we've seen a few days ago. So that's what I'm watching. This is Friday afternoon. You can see the ridge still kind of poking in here into Nova Scotia here Friday night. And then here comes our next trough on Saturday and into Sunday. And that eventually kicks the storm back to the right. But the first part of the weekend, we kind of have the ridge taking over before that trough moves in. So the slower it comes in, the more of a leftwardly turn or westerly turn we see here. Eventually that does get kicked out by this trough, and that protects the eastern U.S. next week. But in the shorter term, we don't see that. Oh, by the way, this is AL98, the future system. GFS shows it could be a threat to the East Coast the following weekend, but I would not put a lot of, I wouldn't put a lot on just one model run. Several model runs have shown it kind of threatening the mid-Atlantic, but man, that's just too far out to make that case at this point. Here's a look at the GFS. You can see here the wind field is going to grow. See it growing over here. Even though the pressure starts coming up on Thursday, the field grows. And you can see, regardless of how much this weakens here, we're going to see strong enough winds getting all the way back to eastern Long Island, Connecticut, over the Sound here, and then all the way up to the Bay of Fundy here Friday night, Saturday morning. Then the storm does weaken to tropical storm intensity. So it will probably be a hurricane near Cape Cod or east of Cape Cod, and then probably a tropical storm, maybe 60, 70 mile per hour winds by the time it comes through the Bay of Fundy. But it's a big enough storm to where it's going to provide us with a lot of damage. You can see strong winds on both sides of the system here, lashing the New England coast, lashing southwestern Nova Scotia. And I would not fixate too much on this because I think it will still change, but you can kind of see how things here start speeding up on Wednesday. Then that track takes it west of Bermuda, but close enough to provide some issues to Bermuda. And then you see this turn back to the northwest briefly here for about 12 to 24 hours before it turned back to the northeast. So still, we've got a lot of details to iron out with this. Looking at the bigger picture here, you can see the GFS model. Here is Margot, here's Lee, and then here's our wave to keep an eye on moving away from Africa and then moving into the central Atlantic next weekend. And you can see these storms are going to be a safe enough distance away. There's a little bit of a nose of high pressure here that keeps the two systems away from each other. And then once these two lift away, here's high pressure building back in across Bermuda and the central Atlantic early next week, a week from today. And as that high pressure area builds back to the west, it keeps these two storms at a good distance from what I think will be Nigel. And because the water temperatures are still pretty warm down here, they're not as warm as they were before Lee, thanks to Lee, but they're warm enough for another hurricane to form somewhere in here. The GFS says our region of high pressure builds in here into the central and northern Atlantic Thursday and Friday of next week. And that allows this system to stay down here to the east of the Bahamas. Eventually it does turn up when our next trough moves in, but we don't know quite yet where this turn happens. The GFS says it's going into North Carolina or going into New Jersey or somewhere in the mid-Atlantic, but that's one model run. It's going to continue to shift. The European control, by the way, says that high pressure area there is not going to be quite as strong, and that's going to allow this system to turn closer to Bermuda next weekend and maybe threaten Atlantic Canada, but maybe turning away. So the GFS says it's about 8 to 9 degrees of longitude farther west than the European. And until we get to next weekend, I don't think we have a true handle on what's going to happen, other than the fact that we will have a storm, probably Hurricane Nigel. And the European operational also says that turn comes sooner. So it will go into the Western Atlantic, but we don't know where that turn happens. It could be near Bermuda, it could be near the East Coast. Again, way too soon to make that call. Here's the Canadian, which has our landfalling system. See how it bends back to the west here? See how it takes Lee back to the west and then comes up east of Yarmouth. So it has a Canadian landfall, but it has that bend back to the left, which again will provide a scare to Cape Cod and eastern Maine. And then landfall here Saturday night. Then it has Nigel trying to cut into that ridge. There's a weakness in the ridge that it's showing here so that it doesn't even come to Bermuda. It makes a turn to the east of Bermuda. So again, let's not get too carried away with future Nigel, but let's just know that it is going to be out there in about a week. Here's a look at the tropical model with Lee. You can see the pressure is expected to drop this afternoon into the low 930s, which is strong Category 4 strength, and then slowly come up here into the 940s on Wednesday. Here's the turn, by the way, and it has Bermuda on the right side, staying away from the hurricane force winds, but getting tropical storm force winds. It also has the storm beginning to speed up here Friday morning. And you can see it's going pretty much from south to north here, a little bit of a left bend as well showing up as this area of wind does grow Friday night, which again is something we have to watch here in coastal New England. All right, so let's look real quick at the Eastern Atlantic. Behind Margot, we've got a wave here, 97L, then we've got another wave, which I think will be 98L. Here's a look real quick at Margot, which is, even though dealing with wind shear, beginning to grow in strength, and will likely be a hurricane here in the next 24 hours based on what we're seeing here, maybe even the next 12 hours. And we're showing wind speeds going up to 85 miles per hour and then a slowing of forward speed as it runs into the next ridge and then gradually weakening. So probably not getting past Category 1 at this juncture and then weakening by the time we get to Thursday and Friday. So Category 1 is all we're seeing with Margot, not going to be a major hurricane, not going to be a threat to land, and some uncertainty in the forward speed of it once we get to about Friday. But I will say that the ensembles are trending to the right. The black line here shows that the curve is going to be closer to Africa than it is to Bermuda, which is good news. And then the European says, well, whatever's left of it may try to loop back to the west, but it's not going to be a threat to land at that point. 97L does not look healthy at all. I don't even know if there's a low-level center under here. I have a feeling that this is going to be going away pretty soon. That yellow X is going to be gone. We're watching the system behind it, which has the better chance. You can see that one's probably going to absorb this one and turn it to the west-northwest. We have to see exactly where that goes. The European ensembles have some uncertainty here. The control run takes it close to the GFS. The mean of the ensembles takes it near to the east of Bermuda, and several ensembles curve it well to the east like the Canadian shows. So a lot of spread, as you might expect for a system that hasn't formed, but all of them are showing a storm that could become a hurricane or a stronger tropical storm here in the central Atlantic. And even though this says 97L, what's actually happening is the wave behind it's going to absorb it in here, and this will be 98L and probably Nigel by the time it gets over here to about 50 west. So stay tuned on that one. You can see models show intensification. Several go hurricane intensity here by next weekend. Again, I don't know how quickly it's going to happen, but I think it does eventually happen. You can see this is 97L. The pressure just never really gets that low. Here's the next one behind it. You can't really even see it. But as we go further into time here on Wednesday and into Thursday, you see how this little circulation here starts going away and the one behind it begins developing here on Thursday. And that ends up taking over here. And you see these two are kind of pivoting around each other. I don't know if that's actually going to happen or not. This is just one tropical model. But overall, you can see eventually we're going to have some sort of a merge coming here on Friday, and a bigger storm takes over and probably becomes Tropical Storm Nigel on Thursday and Friday. And then that's going to head west-northwest. We'll have to watch it in the islands. Right now, I think it's going to stay to your north. The bigger question mark is how strong is the ridge going to be building in north of this system next weekend and into the week of the 18th? And we will not know the answer to that for probably at least another week. Thank you all so much for watching today. I know I got a little bit technical, but I think everyone needs to understand what we're looking at here. This forecast could continue to change a little bit. I'm going to provide you guys with daily videos. I will not be able to do a video tomorrow morning. I will be traveling in a hotel and don't have all my gear set up with me. So I'll just have a couple of updates on the community page, but Wednesday morning I will be back. And if you did enjoy this video, please consider subscribing. It helps support me and grow my reach. It helps you all see what I'm expecting and how I differ from other meteorologists and the National Hurricane Center. My goal is to keep you all safe. My goal is to prepare you for the future. And as always, there is certainly a chance that this forecast will change, and know that. I think any meteorologist would say that to you, but at the same time, it doesn't help to wait until the storm is about to hit to get it right. I think we need to look at things in the farther distance to show you all what we expect. So I thank you all for your time today, and I want to give God all the glory. As a Christian man, I feel that is what I'm truly doing and what's driving me to do what I do every day. God's created me, given me this blessing to help bless you all as a meteorologist, and he has blessed us by sending his son Jesus to die on the cross so that we can live eternally if we choose to accept him. John 15:9-13, King James Version, says that as the Father hath loved me, so have I loved you. Continue ye in my love. If ye keep my commandments, ye shall abide in my love, even as I have kept my Father's commandments and abide in his love. These things have I spoken unto you, that my joy might remain in you, and that your joy might be full. This is my commandment, that ye love one another as I have loved you. Greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friends. And truly that is, I mean, if you think about love as God intended it, that we love each other is that we sacrifice ourselves for other people, because the ultimate sacrifice was made, that Jesus Christ died on the cross. He was resurrected so that we can live with him heavenly in his kingdom when our time on earth here is gone. My question to you is, would you rather choose to love other people the way that God has loved us? Or would you continue to not want to repent, not turn towards God, and to do what the world wants you to do? And that's the love that ends up leading in war, that ends up leading in divide, that ends up leading in divorce, strained and fractured relationships. So just think about that. I'm not trying to beat you over the head with a Bible. I just want you to see that God intended for us to love each other, and he was the ultimate example for us by sending Jesus to die on the cross for us. And that is wonderful news, because we can have joy in knowing that, the joy in God, that our joy might be full. And you know, that verse, John 15:13, about laying down your lives for his friends, men, think about that as well, because a lot of people did that. They laid down their life to fight for our freedom here, knowing that they were part of something a lot bigger. And, you know, I have friends in the military. I was in the military. People that are in, you know, public safety, first responders, they're out there just continually giving and giving and giving and giving. It's not for the paycheck. It's for the love of other people. I know that's exactly why they're doing it. Same with people practicing medicine. It's to help others. I could never do anything like that. So the best I can really do is just to give you guys my time and resources to be a forecaster. And I don't want to compare myself to other people. Just know, though, that I'm doing this purely out of love for you. This is not to make a buck. Trust me, I've got a good paying job. This is to help other people and to share the joy that I have, because I accepted Jesus Christ as my Savior over 10 years ago. And I'm happy to pray over you no matter what your situation is, because I want you to also see and feel that joy and that love. I hope you all have a wonderful Monday. We'll talk again soon. God bless you.